Prime Minister's questions.
Member for Carnival Central.
Could the Prime Minister inform this House, after close to some 30 months in the life of this government, what he considers the most significant achievement of his government thus far by the administration?
Madam Speaker, it is with great satisfaction that I'm able to report to my colleague on the other side 10 of the things that we've been able to accomplish. Firstly, Madam Speaker, protection of the National Treasury. The Treasury is now in safe hands. Secondly, Madam Speaker, elimination in governmental activity of the rampant corruption that existed before. Thirdly, Madam Speaker, stabilization of the economy, managing under very tight fiscal arrangements and extensive debt to keep the economy stable. Fourthly, Madam Speaker, preservation of jobs. Fifthly, Madam Speaker, significant reduction in waste in public expenditure. Sixthly, Madam Speaker, initiation of a development program, which is largely supported by a recovery of approximately $1 billion from the Point 14 highway project. Seven, Madam Speaker, initiation of efforts to diversify the economy in the areas of industry and tourism. Eight, Madam Speaker, settlement of upstream gas pricing contracts to deal with the ongoing curtailment, bringing about some stability in contracting and prices. 9, Madam Speaker, identification and agreement for additional gas supplies from outside our borders so that we can continue into the medium and long term to be a gas producer. And 10th, Madam Speaker, commencement of corruption proceedings against persons and entities who have stolen public money.
Supplemental.
Is the Prime Minister aware that while all of these things might be good intentions, the reality on the ground is that the debt has in fact gone up by about 12% during the time? Yes, these are questions. That
Member,
the job...
One question at a time, 15 minutes.
But the Prime
15
Minister
seconds.
asked 10 things, said 10 things.
Member. You have 15 seconds to ask. Please ask the question.
Is the Prime Minister aware that under his government, the debt has increased by about 12%? And secondly, that the jobs that he's...
Please, member. There are 4 supplementals. You can ask one. Prime Minister.
I'm very aware, Madam Speaker, of the state of the debt and its movement, the steepest part of the curve being the debt that was incurred under the last government. And with respect to any continuing increase under this administration, Madam Speaker, that increase was largely paying off debt incurred by the last government, and Madam Speaker, the largest of which was the back pay of almost $5 billion to public servants on the way out of office. So, Madam Speaker, I'm aware of it, he's aware of it, you're aware of it.
Carnival Central, supplemental.
Is the Prime Minister aware that there have in fact been job losses in this country to a significant degree in both the public and private sector, and it is registered in terms of the labor force participation?
One question, Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the government and the country are very aware that there have been job losses. but there also have been job creation opportunities as well. And Madam Speaker, it is impossible. It is impossible, Madam Speaker. If you don't want to hear the answer, just let me know, you know. Madam Speaker, it is impossible for us to manage our national situation, which is impacted by significant revenue reductions without some action, positive or negative, on the job creation or losses situation. So it's no news that there have been some job losses, but there have also been job creations. For example, on the Point 14 project, as we put the money back to work that was about to be stolen, a number of persons are now on the job.
For now, premium supplemental.
The Prime Minister indicated as one of the achievements the elimination of waste. Does he stand by that in the context of the 100 million on fake oil, 92,000 in Tobago, the group DC lobbies $16 million, 2.5 million for a fetch match to open the Brian Lara Academy, and 3.5 for the chair of the CL Financial on sexual harassment charges? Are you willing?
Madam Speaker, I just want the member to know, this obsession with the Brian Lara, the opening of the Brian Lara Stadium was a profitable exercise because the costs were less than the revenues, and that means it was profitable. And Madam Speaker, with respect to the other matters, right, I can simply say that none of those could be pointed as benefiting any individual in this government, unlike the last government.
But for Oropuch West, member for Carney Central.
Can the Prime Minister indicate, I heard him to say, that the upstream negotiations have been settled. Can the Prime Minister indicate whether this has had any effect on the downstream problems that we have had recently, and whether this was fully taken into account in the negotiations if they were settled?
Madam Speaker, as you may recall, contracts in this country had been left unattended, and in fact, the settlement of that has been one of the better achievements of this government because it gave us an opportunity to stay in the gas business. And yes, we did take into account the downstream, because if you don't produce upstream, there is no downstream industry to take into account.
Since the presentation of the Welsh Health Report by the government, could the Prime Minister inform this House why has the government not implemented many of the recommendations made in this report?
Madam Speaker, this is really a question coming from my colleague, which ought not to be answered. In this very House, Madam Speaker, in this very House, we took the Welsh report to the members of Parliament by way of a joint select committee. Those on the other side refused to participate in the joint select committee and is coming now to ask me what? Coming to ask me what now? The joint select committee on the Welsh report was placed before this House, and the reason why it has not functioned to date is because those on the other side flatly refused to participate in a report about healthcare delivery in this country. They're only playing politics and asking nonsensical questions.
Central Carney.
Would you indicate then, as the government, whether you do not have the authority to implement the recommendations of the report despite what you said? You are in charge.
Madam Speaker, I do not wish to be told I'm in charge by the member. We are in charge, we are the government, and that's why we are implementing the measures. We are implementing the measures as and when they become implementable.
Bearing in mind that all the recommendations are implementable, why is the Prime Minister evading the implementation of these recommendations?
Madam Speaker, I do not know where you got the impression from that all the recommendations are implementable. A report makes recommendations. It does not mean that all the recommendations are implementable and implementable today.
So if not all, but some are implementable, why are you not implementing the some or nothing? Or nothing?
Madam Speaker, I have just said that we are implementing as and when they are available to be implemented. So it is quite improper to say that we are not implementing any of the recommendations.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Prime Minister, could the Prime Minister inform this House of the MV Galleon Passage has set sail from China to Trinidad and Tobago?
Madam Speaker, to the best of my information, the vessel has not set sail as yet because it's awaiting some clearance as soon as the public service arrangements in China are available.
Could the Prime Minister indicate to this House when the agreement was signed to purchase the boat, if a timeline of delivery was indicated to the government of Trinidad and Tobago?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, yes, a timeline was indicated. That timeline has been impacted upon by the administration of the Chinese New Year, and as soon as that gets out of the way, in a few days' time, the timeline will be revised.
Supplemental member for Couva South.
Could the Prime Minister clear the air in terms of whether the delay has anything to do with the fact that the engines that have been designed for this boat in China is not in keeping with what would be needed in traversing between Trinidad and Tobago?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, that is misinformation meant to create mischief. I have no such information and no such consideration applies to this vessel.
Member for Naprima.
Prime Minister, in setting the timelines for the arrival of the boat in Trinidad and Tobago, were the government aware at that time of the Chinese New Year celebrations?
Madam Speaker, it is not the first time that plans that were made would have failed because they were impacted by unforeseen circumstances. The government of Trinidad and Tobago had to hire commercial agents to put a crew together and so on. These things take certain considerations into account, and when they were completely ready to move, they were impacted by circumstances beyond their control. And we'd rather be safe than be sorry.
Member for Orupuchis. Member for Naprima.
Would the Prime Minister not agree that if proper procurement policies were put in place, consistent with the procurement legislation, these things would have been foreseen by the government?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I do not understand what the procurement legislation has to do with it. The vessel was properly procured by properly procurement procedures, and therefore that question has no merit.
Member for Tabaki.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Prime Minister, could you indicate whether the Southern Command of the United States Army and or the FBI is involved in the surveillance, intelligence gathering and detention of potential terrorists in Trinidad and Tobago as reported by CNN?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I have not watched CNN for a number of weeks, so I cannot speak to CNN's reporting. What I can do is to indicate, as I've done on many occasions to the national community, that in this question of responding to our exposure to terrorist activities and similar, that Trinidad and Tobago does not stand alone, should not and must not stand alone. And we cooperate with a number of countries, mainly the United States, Britain, Australia, and any other country that has exposure and or experience to terrorism, and we share information for our mutual benefit.
Supplementary member for Tabakit.
Is the Prime Minister confirming, therefore, that the United States Southern Command was involved in the recent identification of potential terrorists and had a hand in the determination to pick up people and interrogate them?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, for the nth time, the picking up of people and the interrogation of people in Trinidad and Tobago has been done 100% by the state agencies of Trinidad and Tobago. And we've said on many occasions that in monitoring, in treating with threats of this nature, that we share information with agencies of the United States and other countries.
Member for Orupuchis.
Thank you very much. Given that the Carnival is over and cannot be disrupted again, Could the Prime Minister indicate what specific threat to disrupt the Carnival existed that caused these events?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, through its ongoing monitoring, became aware of threats from persons who subscribe to that kind of behavior that we have become accustomed to in the 21st century. The threat that we specifically responded to was a threat to take action against the Carnival parades by persons of interest to the security services of Trinidad and Tobago.
Supplemental member for Carnival East.
How would you account, Honourable Prime Minister, for the conflicting statements between the Minister of National Security and yourself with regards the involvement of the United States in this issue?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, a lot of effort is being made to look for conflict. If one stays with the facts, you will see no conflict. The operations in Trinidad and Tobago were led by and involved the security services personnel of Trinidad and Tobago. Other personnel of other countries, with suppliers, with support, information, and equipment. And Madam Speaker, we are eternally grateful. And I thank all those agencies for the work they have done in securing the population, and we continue to thank our partners internationally for the support they give to the people of Trinidad and Tobago in the face of the threats that we live with.
You said that you were aided by the U.S. with equipment. Is the U.S. actually using equipment to monitor activities in Trinidad and Tobago on behalf of the government?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I've said no such thing, and I will not now say it.
Member for Caroni Central. Member for Tabaki. Sorry, member for Tabaki.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Prime Minister, are you convinced that there was and continues to be a credible threat to national security as announced by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service over the last 2 weeks?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, as Chairman of the National Security Council, I see on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis the existential threats to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. On this particular occasion, yes, I continue to be concerned, and I'm convinced that we faced a credible threat.
Supplemental member for Tabaki.
Honourable Prime Minister, 13 persons were taken in and held, of which a number have been released. I believe up to 6 or 8 have been released. Why are these people being released if in fact this threat was so credible?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, that is a matter of law enforcement and for law enforcement into which I would not venture. However, to say that the fact that they have been released or the fact that nothing has happened is proof that nothing could have happened is pure folly.
Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Prime Minister, in his capacity as head of the National Security Council, assure this nation that the security services in the country have the intelligence capability and wherewithal to protect our citizens from surprise attacks by extremist groups?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the very fact that the attack is described as surprise, that in itself should tell you that it might be surprising to whatever you put in place. However, I want to give the country the assurance that we have been improving our ability to monitor, to intercept, and to respond. And that ability is one of our primary efforts, and we continue to improve in that area. Madam Speaker, the threat that we face is a very amorphous one. And in fact, it changes its shape, its size, its location, and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, through its many agencies, is required to be able to respond along the way. We have been improving the quality of our personnel, improving the training by, once again, I must mention that we do so through international contacts, international reports. We place persons outside. We actually communicate with and bring people into Trinidad and Tobago to assist us with the training. We improve our technical capabilities and so on. But when you bear in mind, Madam Speaker, that the nature of this particular threat, which could lead to a surprise attack, is one that resides within communication in the internet, on the telephone, and by doctrines which are alien to us. This threat, as it exists in Trinidad and Tobago and elsewhere in the world, will be with us for quite a while and challenge us continuously.
John.
I know that this is an answer that has to do with the security of the state, and he has to be circumspect. But are there ISIS, is there anything in Trinidad and Tobago that can be considered an ISIS cell or an ISIS satellite?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, it is common knowledge across the world, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, that citizens of Trinidad and Tobago subscribe to some of the doctrines of ISIS, and persons from Trinidad and Tobago have traveled to areas of combat in Iraq and Syria. Many of them have been intercepted in Turkey, in Britain. Some have been returned to Trinidad and Tobago. Some are in custody in foreign countries, persons who seek to join ISIS. And in fact, as ISIS has been dispersed in Iraq and Syria, that doctrine now is spread to homebound activities, and therefore we have to be particularly concerned about such persons, and the monitoring of such persons is an integral part of our national security. And the answer to the question is yes.
Supplemental member for Kumuto Manzanilla.
Prime Minister, in light of the fact that you made a statement that your government's ability to gather intelligence working with other countries, does this, in fact, was the fact that our Prime Minister, Kamala Prasad-Biswas, at that time, who signed an agreement with
Member,
the
15
US
seconds to ask your question,
to
please.
bring together assistance for our country, has this aided in your ability to gather intelligence and to work with other countries?
Prime Minister.
I have no idea what that confused question was about. This has nothing to do with any signing of any agreement. The United States, Britain, India, Pakistan, these are all countries that we've had and continue to have relations with in this matter.
Member for Naparima.
Prime Minister, in view of the fact that 3 weeks ago the Canadian government in the Canadian Parliament said that they are actively monitoring 61 returning Canadian terrorists, could you give us similar information into how many terrorists have returned and give us the assurance that they are being effectively monitored?
Madam Speaker, the figure of how many terrorists have returned is a floating figure, because not everyone who goes abroad and comes back is deemed to be a terrorist. And the intent of persons would vary. However, in monitoring persons who we have reason to believe pose a threat to the country, I don't know whether the figure is 63 or 100, but we are taking steps to ensure that all persons who are so described are adequately monitored. Madam Speaker, it is not possible to monitor 24 hours a day every citizen in this country. But those persons whom the security services have deemed to be such would also be monitored. And the guarantees that we can give is that the security services continue to pay attention to persons who threaten the stability and security of Trinidad and Tobago.
Supplemental, Carney Central.
Could the Prime Minister indicate whether he feels that our security forces here have the ability and capacity to monitor communication between an international ISIS operation and local presence here in Trinidad and Tobago?
Madam Speaker, I don't know any country is able to say that, because the communication is so varied and so technical. In fact, there's an area called the dark web where it is said that the criminals and terrorists are better able to handle it than states. And of course, we do have and we are improving our own ability to monitor. But I tell you something else, Madam Speaker. People who are going down that road of attempting to become effective terrorists are not now only relying on those kinds of communication. For example, they would rely only on face-to-face communication between family members. they rely on other kinds of communication because they know that we are monitoring them. And many of them do not use the system because they know you're monitoring them. And therefore, they use other systems. In fact, they can even use the walkie-talkies, which are not on the telephoning system. And they make up their own system as long as they are intent on being involved in criminal activity. They continue to change their methods and so on.
Member for Kamutu Mansinela, might I ask, having regard to the supplementals and the responses, whether you're still interested in question 7? Yes, you still.
On what it is,
No, that question is over. I'm asking with respect to question 7. Are you still interested in asking question 7?
Yes.
Okay. Member Kamutu Mansinela.
In light of the recent reports of planned terrorist activities during the recently concluded Carnival season, could the Honourable Prime Minister inform this House what steps are being taken by his government to ensure the safety and security of the national community post-Carnival 2018?
Madam Speaker, I just spent the last 10 minutes answering that question. And if I might only add that last September, I think it was, the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago approved and is operationalizing a counter-terrorism strategy.
Supplemental.
Honourable Prime Minister, what communication strategy has been effectively put in place for mass communication of the citizens should a serious threat arise, seeing that there's a communication in place?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, we have agencies of the state, the Office of Disaster Preparedness, and beyond that, we do have communication from the Office of the Commissioner of Police. And beyond that, I do not wish to expose any further our communication strategy, which might be specific to certain situations, to alert persons who might be under observation.
Honourable Prime Minister, are you saying that if a threat had to take place, that the citizens would not be aware of what they are required to do until it actually happens?
And I will not allow that. That was not said. Member for Couva South.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, Prime Minister, in your capacity as the head of the National Security Council, are you prepared to take the necessary steps to ensure that the vacant positions of 1,100 police officers, as indicated by Deputy Commissioner of Police David Dularchan, is filled?
Well, Madam Speaker, Deputy Commissioner Dularchan says we need to fill 1,000 posts. Commissioner Gibbs said we have too many officers.
Member for Carney East.
With respect to the Honourable Maxi Coffey, the Member of Parliament, could the Prime Minister indicate the general state of his health, an expected return date to official duties, as well as the cost to the country so far on both the Minister's medical management in the United States and his treatment in Trinidad and Tobago?
Madam Speaker, the information we received from MP Maxi Coffey through his family is that he has made considerable progress from whenever he experienced the medical episode as described by his doctor. And he has made considerable progress and is likely to return to the country in the not too distant future. And at that time, his ability to continue the job that he was doing before would be assessed. The government of Trinidad and Tobago intervened to assist Minister Coffey at a time when his life was being threatened. The government, through the normal procedures available to members of the cabinet ministers, paid a bill at, well, I think the bill has been paid, but incurred an expense on his behalf at St. Clair Medical in the sum of $980,000, $263.69. That brought MP Coffey to a situation where it was recommended that his recuperation would be improved and his condition stabilized if he got treatment abroad urgently. And at that stage, the government of Trinidad and Tobago kept an assistance through air ambulance of $46,000 US and a stroke recovery program of $171,000 US. Those are the bills incurred by the state with respect to the life-threatening condition of Minister Coffey.
Members, the time for Prime Ministerial questions is now spent.